Ladies and gentlemen, we would now like to introduce our final panel of the day, Energy Security and the Strategic Competition. This conversation will be moderated by Nina Badger, Associate Director for Energy at the Special Competitive Studies Project. Please welcome our speakers. Dr. William Chappell, Vice President and Chief Technology Officer for the Strategic Missions and Technologies Division at Microsoft. The Honorable Paul Dabbar, Co-founder and CEO of Bohr Quantum Technology, and Helena, Director of the Office of Critical and Emerging Technologies at the Department of Energy.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I'm honored to have this panel here of current and former government officials to talk about our national security strategy and how it may affect our energy priorities, and inversely, how new technology and energy trends may actually affect how we think about national security in general. So to kick the conversation off, I'd kind of want to start with a little bit of a bigger framing question, and what are the geopolitical implications of AI-driven changes in energy use and consumption? Why does this matter so much? And Paul, we can start with you.
Well, I'll start off with economics. For those of you who heard the point from Bob Liu, the CEO of Dominion, the economic impact of the growth is incredibly high. If you look at a 100 megawatt data center in Loudoun County, it's about $5.8 billion of capital investment. And there's 96 plus of them. So you just kind of stop and you think about, jobs, what we're building, whether it's, fab and design and Caterpillar, right, power plant, the backup, and utility systems, and the tax base and the jobs. I mean, first of all, it is the rest of the world looks at the United States in a stunning way about what's happened, especially in the last 12 months and the impact of that. Secondly is the impact of AI on economics. Let me just pick an energy application. In the wind sector, a big developer might have 3,000 of the exact same turbines. Using AI to optimize maintenance operations, they could probably drive their return on equity and their performance of their wind turbines by a significant amount, right? So better energy, more profits. I'm just picking on one Gen AI operation for something incredibly practical, optimizing a fleet of wind farms. Absolute moneymaker, and you can apply this to one after the other. And then the last one is national security, right? AI has applications in the defense space, and the implications of how you are able to apply that, on many different aspects will have an impact on the battlefront and before the battlefront.
Yeah, Helena, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and I think you heard, is my mic on?
Yeah.
If you were here in the morning, you heard from our secretary, there's many things that we're really looking at when we look at AI for energy and what the opportunity space for that is, as well as the energy that's going to be needed to power AI. And I think DOE is sitting at this sort of intersection of both of these really critically important topics. We obviously see the national security implications of where this AI gets trained, where it gets cited. We also understand the commercial needs, right? Like we also are in a sort of broader competition space, and so our US industry needs to be able to compete in that space. And we also see what opportunity AI will provide that I think is going to be truly transformative for science, our ability to discover new kinds of materials to power new types of energy technologies.
Yeah, speaking of the implications for the energy sector, we did a demonstration with PNNL, and we were able to create a battery where we took many weeks off of that development cycle, and it's maybe not the world's best battery yet, but that radically different flow where you have AI empowering both the domain-specific models and then now agents that are sort of LLM-powered or sort of foundationally powered to be able to do things that typically have been human driven. That cycle being dramatically shorter is going to be obviously very exciting, but also have national ramifications. And so I get very excited about thinking about where that's going to impact energy. Like in many ways, the human capacity to invent and discover, right, just got a shot in the arm, really, even in the last month, right, of things that do scientific reasoning and can be that co-pilot or scientist guide towards faster discovery. So that's clearly going to have both energy impact and national security impact.
Yeah, and thank you for this. I think even zooming out a little bit more, we think about this a lot also in the context of the strategic competition with China. I think as we focus on this, Helena, you have worked at the embassy in Beijing, you went in National Security Council, you're now at DOE, and you're also kind of looked at as the chief AI officer. You're right in the middle of all of it. For you, what's been the biggest shift you've seen in that dynamic in the last 10 years or so?
So, I mean, certainly there's a lot to unpack in that question. I will say, I served at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing from 2012 to 2018. It was a time of significant change. I think, we worked with a lot of companies in that time period, and a lot of those companies came and they said, look, we're bringing second, third gen technology, we're going to be innovating, and it's all going to be fine. And I think that what we've seen is that there's been tremendous industrial policy in China, tremendous investment, lots of different activities that they've been taking to really take the commanding heights, right? I think in this space, in AI, whether it be in AI or whether it be in energy, there needs to be that investment in the United States, right? And we need that not only to build capacity in the system and provide more compute to everybody, and not only to manage the risks of AI, but to develop an actual capability to solve real-world problems. And I think that's one of the things that I'm super excited about at DOE, because we've just launched our FAST initiative, which a lot of you heard about earlier, stands for Frontiers in AI for Science, Security, and Technology. And what that really is a transformative capability for science, applied energy, and national security. And we think that's going to be incredibly important to do in partnership with industry and with academia. So I would just make a super quick plug. We have a request for information that's out on the street now that's closing in November. Very much interested in ideas, thoughts from the wider community on how we should be prioritizing some of the things and the activities in that initiative.
Thank you. And this is kind of a big question, Paul, but in terms of this strategic competition with China in this tech ecosystem, are we winning? And if you don't necessarily know a clear answer to that, are we leveraging our strengths effectively? And is there anywhere that you feel that maybe we're falling kind of dangerously behind?
So I think in this area, like in most areas, the US and the OECD, democratic countries, by far lead the world in discovery. It doesn't come close. You could look at Nobel Prizes, you could look at all the normal metrics that the discovery of new things is driven kind of very strongly amongst the democratic countries and the US in particular. And so you're seeing that as kind of the first development of OpenAI and other of the software companies, Microsoft obviously, a big part of that. You're seeing first design of chips, of which the US has been by far the leader of doing that, less so on the manufacturing side, but obviously have friends who've been very successful at supporting that. So the intellectual property of that kind of hardware, that design, as well as on the software side. The challenge with China is it absolutely does an excellent job of scaling, okay, and manufacturing, right? That's a big advantage of what they're able to do. But to a large degree, they tend to follow, right? They tend to not be the generator of the Nobel Prize, obviously based on data, And so same thing on chips, same thing on AI, but they are, they copy things very quickly. They take a look at what others are doing, they see the path, and they try to head down that path, and they try to jump past the discovery by throwing a lot at it and focus at it. And so clearly the United States has massively gapped out on this topic in 12 months. It's a stunning jump on many different levels. Another one is, both AMD and NVIDIA are planning to pump out a new chip every year. Previously, that took 5 or 6 years. And it used to take DOE to ask for the next chip for the next supercomputer. Now on their own, they're both going to develop a chip a year. And that speed, America's picking up on speed. China's going to try to figure out what we're doing and try to copy it as quickly as possible, but we're speeding up, which is a great advantage.
Yeah, I think to actually stay on this point for both Helena and William, how important is speed for this? Even from your own vantage point, how important is it that we get this right quickly?
Well, I will just quickly jump in and just say it's called fast for a reason. But I mean, just a little bit more elaboration. I think whoever is going to be first to develop the most powerful AI and actually use it to solve the problems that we need solving is going to have a tremendous advantage. And so all of the things that we think about on like speed to discovery, speed to better batteries, speed to our solving national security issues, we cannot be in a situation where other countries get there first.
Yeah, I think speed obviously is going to be very important. I think back, 3 years ago, so really it was 2020 when we announced our AI supercomputer, but that traced back to really 2018 decisions. And so that was like 10,000 GPUs, and then GPT-3 was trained on that system, and then 3.5 came, and then ChatGPT wrote on top of 3.5, and that moment when you're like, wow, we had talked about that at DARPA. There was the first wave, second wave, and third wave, and John Launchbury, who actually has a really great video out there describing what was going to happen, and it was almost exactly right. In 2016, described that 2022, late 2022 moment, right, where everybody realized like you can actually converse with a computer, and it was this like really fast wow moment, and then the hype cycle happened, right? People over appreciated what it would do, and then then got disillusioned that couldn't do all these other things. But then you're like, go back and you're like, okay, that was an amazing first experience that you had, and then since then, right, you have imagery, you've got video, you now have scientific reasoning, all within really the last 2 years, right, that have hit the market. So that speed of disruption, right, is really fast in AI. What is going to happen as that now then impacts things like the chemistry sector or the bio sector, right, as they harness what that vector does for them, you're going to actually see that acceleration start happening in all these other domains. And so the speed in which that branches out, as it's no longer an AI story, it's a scientific discovery story, right? Or it's a better energy story, right? Is kind of where things are kind of quickly heading now. And so I think it's all about speed.
Yeah, and I think to follow up there, if things are moving quickly, we also at the same time need to make sure that it's secure and that we're covering our bases that way. And so what are companies like Microsoft doing to make sure that we, in a cybersecurity point of view, we're making sure that that's also just as high on the priority list?
Absolutely. So the RAI principles that we were actually, even before that moment, had already written down a series of principles that were how we were going to approach and altered them some when sort of this contextual AI or foundational AI came along, but they were pretty good already, right? And that you were able to exercise what's already happening within the company, and then they stood up in a much bigger way as became the basis of the company. It went from AI was a thing we did to really the focus of the company, and now you've got very rigorous approaches and policies of knowing your customers, how you actually analyze, red team the models deeply. There's a transparency report that we publish every year, which I think is actually a really good thing, that our entire process and how it's being applied to each one of our products is now something that we pledge to just tell the good and the bad. We've learned a lot of lessons as you put a brand new capability in the hands of hundreds of millions of people around the globe, and so as you learn those lessons, how do we share those with the community? Both packaging those up. We have now 33 open source packages, which are just all the lessons we've learned packaged into things like automated red teaming, right, or automated content filtering. Like, that's now available to the community. So that's one level of transparency. The other is just sharing, the lessons learned and being humble to say, we don't always get it right, but we're, learning what scale is.
Yeah, so in terms of just keeping things secure in that cybersecurity realm, Paul and Helena, how is this kind of coming to fruition in your own work? I know that there's one kind of lean with you with the National Security Presidential Memorandum 33, which, for those of you who don't know, keeps government-supported R&D secure from exploitation by foreign governments. It was pivotal in research policy. And so that's just one example of DOE. Where is this on your list of priorities in terms of making sure that we're fast and also secure and ensuring that that happens as well?
Yeah, I think that's a great, quickly on the cybersecurity and AI point, we have been doing quite a lot of analysis into what the benefits and the risks of AI pose to the grid as a sector risk management agency, working closely with utilities to look at that picture that's evolving and doing a lot of engagement there. On the questions around, research security policy, this is my former life. At the end of the day, right, risk is on a continuum, and NSPM 33 focuses on this small part of the continuum, which is basic science generally and open science. There's obviously, other areas, both classified work as well as, what companies are doing, and you need to take the right tool for the right problem. And manage that risk so that you can get the benefits. So, DOE is a place where we kind of see the entire spectrum from discovery science to the applied energy space and then the national security questions. And so really have a managed research environment and an approach to these issues when it comes to things behind the fence line at our national labs. Shout out to our 2 national lab directors who are here. But then, of course, we take a broader approach like NSPM 33 when it comes to academia, and still others like our Research Technology and Economic Security Office, which is focused on grants that we give out to industry and others.
Yeah, so I think creating or finding the new technologies that can add additional layers of security is actually really important. The adversary, MSS in China and elsewhere, are developing new offensive technologies, and so you need to have more defensive technologies to add as that adversary gets stronger. So one of the things I did with some partners was spin a company out of Caltech. Company is called Bohr Quantum, and we're using quantum entanglement to communicate between 2 different locations in a very highly secured manner, because you've entangled 2 qubits at a distance, and you can move classical information, not quantum information. You can also use quantum information, but just classical information, and that can be used for banking. JP Morgan's announced that they're testing a quantum network in New York City, and they already tested it in Singapore to use financial data for quantum networks within New York City. We're doing it on the energy company side because obviously security within grids and elsewhere is also important, as well as financial information for JP Morgan.
Thank you. And I think something that kind of is a string that I pulled through here is also the importance of public-private partnerships. And I think we've seen examples throughout here. Many of you have worked on both sides of the aisle and bring that expertise here. So how are you also pulling that to the forefront? How do we use that as an advantage in the US in our innovation system to make sure that we lead in this area?
Well, I'm excited what happened at DEF CON this year. So, really all of the major tech players in AI sponsored a competition. DARPA ran the competition with ARPA-H. And so the government really set the framework. We provide the cloud and the AI, and then let people go at it to see what they could find. And so they used critical infrastructure and the open source challenges, and to frame challenge problems of what can AI do autonomously to scan for vulnerabilities and, more importantly, patch them. And so his first phase was at DEF CON, but they did find things. They actually found a vulnerability that had been in the wild for, I think, over 8 years. Obviously, humans have expected, it was in SQLite. Humans have inspected that for a very long time. And so, it's one of the very first times that you've seen a full, find, fix, and patch cycle that was really hands-off from humans. So, and that was actually not an intended outcome, because that was not planted. And then they found, I forget what percentage, but it was a pretty good start of demonstrating that LLMs, mostly in agent form, but not in agent form, to really do what pen testers would typically do. So when we did the self-driving car challenge from LA to Vegas, everyone remembers that as kicking off this sort of next generation self-driving car capabilities. They forget that the first year was everybody burned their engine in the first mile, right? And so, but the next year, right, they were able to actually go from Vegas to LA to Vegas. I think you're going to see that same leap over the next 12 months, and seeing what we're seeing in the lab. You've got a really great capability that's going to be the intersection of AI and cyber, and so I'm very excited for that, and then to have the government sort of tee that up so that the world can see that sort of live, so that's not buried in some lab somewhere. That's actually going to be, a public exposed thing on stage at DEF CON next year.
Awesome, thank you. Helena?
That's a great example. I kind of want to look back to one example and then kind of talk a little bit about where we see things going. So, one of the recent big public-private partnerships that DOE has had is through the Exascale Computing Project. And this is one where we partnered very, very closely with industry to develop the 2 fastest supercomputers in the world, and a third coming online later in the year. And in that process, you mentioned AMD, Intel, NVIDIA. I think that it really points to the role that the government can play, and in those investments to diversify, right? These 3 companies provide the chips for these 3 flagship machines. But also to work deeply with industry to co-design and co-develop critical components that are in the GPUs that are powering today's AI. And the reason why we were able to get that into industry faster is because we had those close vendor partnerships. And I think that's the power of some of these kinds of very, very deep partnerships that can scale, right? And it is that industry partnership that allows for that. Looking forward, I think especially with the capability of these models that are out there, I do think that we're going to need to figure out what new types of models may need to be developed that will deeply understand math and physics and chemistry and biology. But I think even as these models develop in scientific reasoning capability, it will still get up to the point where it really needs to be harnessed, right? And needs new data to actually learn. And that new data, I think, can leverage our scientific infrastructure at the Department of Energy that, has the most data, scientific data, both unclassified and classified in the world. And that, our 40,000 scientists across the Department of Energy national labs, that they have the expertise to actually harness these reasoning capabilities, this data, to actually solve those science, energy, and security problems. And so, super excited about that. We think that we'll need to do that in deep partnership with industry and with academia. This is the kind of thing that we'll need to bring large teams together, big team science, to do things at scale.
So I think your question is probably one of the most important points about why America is so successful. America was built on the frontier by people going out and coming to a new land and going out to places, and now the frontier is the frontier of the mind. So we still have space, so we still got some physical things to do, but the culture of America is about being on the frontier, about having the freedom of new ideas. It comes from academia. It comes from the capital raising space. It's okay to fail. Get a little bit of money, try something new. If it doesn't work, try something else. You're in a lab, try something. Doesn't work, try something else. And it's part of the culture, right? And the culture feeds into the system, whether it's academia or labs or capital raising and companies. And that sort of cycle is, and you're seeing it just in incredible spades in AI and in the microelectronic space in the last 12 months in a stunning fashion. And so, this is a small p political kind of policy point. I think the better place for public-private partnerships and where government is too far away from cash flow for the private sector. The private, you lay out 1,000 points of light in the private sector, and you leverage all that money that you spend on the discovery side, and once again, the private sector won't do a lot of discovery science, but once they kind of see it moving along, you'll have 1,000 people try a spherical tokamak, and maybe someone else is doing a stellarator. So I'm heading off into fusion, I apologize. And so I have no idea which one of those is really gonna work. Maybe multiple of them. But the best place for the public-private partnership is for early discovery support that you're not gonna get Microsoft putting money into. Throw it out there, see what pops out, and you know what? We can just look at the data. America's been successful with that model. Totalitarian regimes are a little bit of a step back. Industrial policy of picking the actual client-focused technology. The lithium-ion battery is the only chemistry that's going to work, and we're only going to spend money on lithium-ion battery chemistries. I think we can say that with high degree of confidence. That's wrong. There's probably 30 chemistries that would probably work in batteries. So too much industrial policy, too much command and control at the far end, too much dictatorial power on the economy, taking China, can lead to wrong decision making on technologies and innovation. America's proved that public-private partnership is where this government comes in at the beginning and then let 1,000 points of light run with it. And boy, has this topic been incredibly successful on that in the near term.
Yeah, thank you. And I think just on the general topic of innovation, this is a little bit more of a thought exercise kind of question, but if you were to see a 10 times improvement in some energy technology, which one would you think could have an actual radical change of the global order if you were to instantly see that immediate tenfold difference? Which one do you think it could be, whether that's supply chain ecosystem or elsewhere?
Well, I
Or I
might
can
just go.
you
I might
first,
to jump
I need
in.
to think about that one.
So, DOE has been thinking a lot about this, and that's why we have these Earth shots, right, which are really setting ambitious goals for game-changing energy technologies. I'm not going to choose a winner of that, but long-duration energy storage as one example, as being one really game-changing technology. We've set a target to reduce the cost of long-duration energy storage by 90% in the next decade. That's pretty ambitious. We're going to need new chemistries. We're going to need to use AI to discover those new energy materials. It's going to have impacts on supply chains. It's going to have impacts on disaster preparedness and emergency response if you can have long-duration energy storage providing more flexibility onto the grid. And I think there's going to be really wide-ranging impacts going to isolated island nations, places that need more energy, and energy is obviously so tied to prosperity too. So, I mean, that's one. There's others, but yeah, Earth shots.
I'll cheat because, I don't think there isn't one that the government should pick. I actually think it goes back to your speed comment of you should create the environment that allows for this revolution in science to take place, to have the most people, experience it, right, and make sure that the government experiences alongside other people. The regulatory barriers that exist that keep the government from using some of the most modern technology are going to be a national security vector, right? And the number of these meetings that we go to where the government people who are speaking have clearly never used the technology is frightening, right? So there is a barrier for having the right technology in the right hands and making sure that, those 40,000 scientists have full access or better, right? At a bare minimum, they should have as good as what we would have in our lab. They should have better than that. And that's historically how, that's been the expectation, is the government has a ability to outpace, have infrastructure that is uniquely good. So I would actually put my focus not on the outcome or pick a winner, but really focus on the input of making sure that you can drive the fact that the scientific discovery process is going to be done much faster 2 years from now than it is today.
I think it's quite clear what the technology winner is going to be out there for energy. It's the United States of America. And I mean that really clearly. It wasn't very long ago that the US was the largest importer of energy in the world. We were at the whim of cartels outside the United States. We sent people to fight in Kuwait and Iraq because we were the largest energy importer in the world. We're engaged in the Middle East because we had that exposure to there. The US went from the largest energy importer in the world to the largest energy exporter in the world. We hit that in January of this year, okay? That is a stunning amount of BTUs. And that didn't happen because of one thing. It happened because of a portfolio that happened over the last generation that was to a very large degree driven by the United States. High performance computing, evaluation of geology, directional drilling, hydraulic fracturing, the lithium ion battery. We won the Nobel when I was undersecretary. Okay, started here, right? PV solar at Berkeley, right? Because of the really driving down costs under Secretary Chu. Wind turbines that actually worked, starting in the United States. The EV, the first EV company that really worked, America, right? Elon Musk. So, and there is a portfolio of stuff coming up, and I don't know exactly which one's going to work. It's going to be a bunch of them. And so we accomplished in the last generation the amazing shift of power, of energy, of emissions reductions. It's been a stunning success. And the portfolio that's in front of us, it's hard to know which one, but I'm very, very confident. But if I do have to pick one, I think it's going to be fusion.
Thank you. And so we have just a little bit of time left. If we could just do a quick lightning round of what's the one thing that you would want the audience and the greater group to take away from this conversation on energy security and the strategic competition?
So I'll start. I mean, I've already hit this, but I think the things that I'm seeing in the lab set a brand new pace for how things are going to be created. Human discovery, the scientific discovery method, right? It's going to happen, I think, very quickly. And really how you harness that is going to be interesting, right? And you can't sit on the sideline and watch, right? And being a part of that and really making sure that the government is deeply a part of that should be, part of the strategic focus. I know that SCSP is created in essence to tell that story, but I think what was an important story a year or two ago, is actually accelerating, and it's going to be more and more important to have the government alongside having the discovery process as fast as what I see happening elsewhere.
Thank you. Helena?
We at DOE very much see that, and we see what it means for our mission space, and I think that's why we're so activated on this issue and really passionate about, how we harness AI to transform our mission space. We need to be there, or else we're not, or else the whole mission orientation of DOE is lost, right? Industry right now is leading in this part of it. We need to be there with them as we are developing out the application space. We have to be. And I like for all of the reasons why we care about energy security as national security, for all the reasons why we need scientific discovery and the ability to commercialize that at scale, and for all of the things that our national labs are doing, not only in support of DOE's mission, right, but steward for the country and the ways that they are able to, for example, help model the Mars rover landing, or help discover new cancer fighting drugs. Like, these are the kinds of things that we need to be able to do and access first, because it's a matter of strategic competition, national security.
Quick final word.
Yeah, I mean, I think one other clear strength of the United States is around capital raising. The private sector dominates. The United States capital sector for raising capital for the stuff that we're discussing swamps the rest of the world. The number 2 market in the world for raising capital is London at 10% of the United States. And it's not just the public equity markets, but the debt markets, the private debt markets, all the private side, angel investing, venture capital, private equity, infrastructure funds. I could keep going. The US swamps that. And so on top of the innovation, on top of the new ideas, if there's a new idea, there's no place like the United States to raise the money to go do it and to take the risk. And so that is also something which is amazingly powerful. So if you add up each of those, discovery, the innovation cycle, probably the biggest thing we need to continue to work on is manufacturing, but we're not bad. And then the capital side. No one comes close to the United States. And so I'm extremely powerful. So we shouldn't forget about the private sector, capital raising, amazing strength of the United States.
Thank you all. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being here. This has been a great conversation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.